G'day, I'm Owen, you've joined the pub test, and we are continuing the Mary Kelly crime scene. Now, I know many of you disagreed with some of the assertions I made in the last video, but I'm still going to maintain here that I don't think it was Mary Kelly in that room, and I'll bring out a little bit more evidence in this video and the one to follow as well. But I don't mind if you disagree. In fact, I think this is what makes the pub test special, in that we can state opinions, we can have strong opinions, you can really discuss them at length, but no one's getting upset just because we don't necessarily always agree. It's a safe spot to share ideas, and really, I have to say, I thought I knew a fair bit about the Jack the Ripper subject before starting this channel, and I've found out that there was a lot that I didn't know, and that information has come from you people who are putting out comments. So thank you so much for making this the place that it is. And if you are new here and want to be part of this, then look at that subscribe and just give it an old hit. And if you like these videos, give us a like as well. But in this one, we are focusing in on two people. John McCarthy, who owned Miller's Court and the Chandler shop on the corner right next door to 13 Miller's Court, where this body was found, and a bloke by the name of Thomas Bowyer or Bowyer. Now, I don't know if it's Bow or Bow, or even if I'm pronouncing the last bit right, but I have to say there's a place up in Queensland in Australia, and it's spelt Hervey, Bay. How would you pronounce that? I'll give you a second to think. Well, I think most of you would say, well, that's Hervey Bay, but no, the locals say Harvey Bay. I have never seen Harvey spelt with two E's anywhere else ever before. Maybe it has been, but the locals say Harvey Bay, and that's how it's pronounced. So I don't really know how I'm going to pronounce this Thomas bloke's name, but I actually will refer to him as Indian Harry. And the reason why is because that was the nickname he went by, and that's just easier for me to say. Now, he got that nickname because he served in the British military in some campaigns over in Asia. So I actually tried to look up to see, well, there must have been some big war with India at the time around the 1880s, maybe 1870s. I wasn't too sure, perhaps because he was 63, so maybe it was 30 years previous. There's a heck of a lot of wars going on between the British Empire and various countries in that Asian area. It startled me. So I don't know which war he served in, but he came back and was living on a pension, and he did have a residence in Dorset Street. But obviously that pension didn't quite make ends meet, I would suggest, or perhaps he just wanted a bit of extra pocket money. I'm not sure, but it said that he worked for John McCarthy. Now, what work he did, I'm not sure it was all above board necessarily, and we will be diving into that. But for some reason, it was Indian Harry that McCarthy sent to collect the rent from Mary Kelly. Now, remember, Mary Kelly was 6 weeks behind in the rent. And so Indian Harry, he tries to go there around 10:45 a.m. So he says, to catch her before she goes out and spends the money on drink. Mary Kelly was known to have a bit of the old tipple. Now that's strange. And it's got to raise some questions here that either one, it was just absolutely coincidental that the day a body is found in that room is the very day John McCarthy decides to collect this 6 weeks of back rent. Because if Indian Harry doesn't go to 13 Miller's Court, well, that body's not discovered, I would suggest, at least for another day or two, which I would suggest may have been the original plan. But there could be other reasons as to why he was there that morning as well, and maybe it was more of a regular occurrence than has been led to believe at the inquest and in the police statements. Old Harry, he gets there, knocks on the door, no answer. Did he try to unlock the door? Well, maybe, particularly considering of what he does next. So he either knew about the broken window or saw the broken window, and this is not creepy at all. You got a bloke in his mid-60s just peering through the curtain, having a bit of a squiz inside. Well, he got the fright of his life. He sees what I can only describe as one of the most gruesome crime scenes I think many people would ever have the unfortune to see. And that does give him a start. He's really bothered by this. So he goes back to McCarthy's chandler shop, the candle shop. But it said, according to reports, so he's there at 10:45 and he gets back to the candle shop at 10:50 a.m. 5 minutes. Now that has led some to suggest that old Indian Harry must have been really struggling. Not only was he a war veteran, but he must have got massively injured. And yet, all the contemporary illustrations I've found of Indian Harry don't suggest that he was that decrepit. Now, I have to make this as a very important point here, because even if he was using a walking frame, which I'm saying that there's no way that he was, I actually think he was a fairly fit bloke, but suggesting that even he did have a walking frame, he would still have to be moving awfully slow with that walking frame to take 5 minutes to go back to McCarthy's shop that was just literally around the corner. But it's said that it's close to about the same length of time it takes McCarthy and Indian Harry to get back and have a look through that window at Miller's Court. Another 5 minutes or so. And you're only talking about 15-20 steps. So their time frame is very questionable indeed. But it gets a little bit more intriguing here. So now, the police station is about a 5-minute walk away. Not 5 minutes from Miller's Court to the chandler shop attached to the building. No, it's a 5-minute walk to the police station. But John McCarthy says to Harry, "You go get the police." Something happens and McCarthy decides that, well, he'll catch up with Harry, and they arrive at the police station together. But it's taken them close to 20 minutes to arrive at the police station. And it was a 5-minute walk. They now give a statement at the police station as to what they saw and what happened. And they verify that Harry went there first. He goes back and gets McCarthy. McCarthy sends him off. They don't state exactly what happens then, but they do arrive at the police station together. And both of them verify that version of events. Now, interestingly, it does not take the policeman 20 minutes to get back to Miller's Court. But what happens with the police is the subject of the next video, because that is intriguing as well. But interestingly, at the inquest, McCarthy and Harry change their story. They say, well, we headed off together to the police station. Why was there need to change that story? See, their story just doesn't pass the pub test, the original story. It makes no sense that it took one that long to decide to get going to the police station, and then why, if you're John McCarthy, you catch up with old Indian Harry and not just blast past him? Why would you not be running as fast as you could? But there's another thing here to consider that also makes no sense. Now, if John McCarthy could get there quicker, and obviously he could because he caught up with Indian Harry along the way, why would he not tell Harry, "You stay here, watch the shop"? Because at no point did John McCarthy say, well, I sent Harry off in front so that I could lock the shop up and just make sure everything was secure. I know, like a bit of self-interest here, but it was going to gather a crowd, and I just did not need that drama of people looting all my shop. But why did he not tell Harry, "You stay here and I'll go get the police"? That would also be reasonable. But then the story changes at the inquest and nobody asked that question. But that story makes no sense whatsoever. Because they don't state anywhere that, well, we saw the body when we both looked at it, then we both decided we better make the area secure, lock up the shop, and then go to the police station together. And before I dissect this a little bit further, there's another intriguing little bit of detail that we need to add. And that is, as the police are turning up, John McCarthy actually asks, can I choose which inspector is turning up on the scene? Which they say, no, whoever's closest, he's coming on down. So you'll just have to deal with that. So it means he knew some people on the police force. At least an inspector or two, perhaps. And he would have preferred them to be looking at this crime scene, not just any random inspector. Now, it would seem that Harry was getting a little bit sketchy about this because he was making it very clear at the inquest. He was doing the good old soldier thing. I was just obeying orders. I was doing what McCarthy told me to do. You don't really get away with that line of reasoning anymore today as much as you used to, but he definitely probably saw some holes in what they were saying and needed to just cover himself just in case the whole thing fell over. So what was going on? Now, it has been stated too that McCarthy identified Mary Kelly. Therefore, it said that my assertion in the last video that Joseph Barnett's quick identification probably stacks up because someone else has identified the body, yet I'm going to say that there's good reason why John McCarthy did not want any further police attention than was absolutely necessary. I'm suggesting he would not have cared who that body was. He just didn't want them to look into it that hard. Now, I am going to state some theories that are out there as regards this, and then I'll present the one which I actually think passes the pub test, the one that I believe is the real truth. But the first one is that Mary Kelly was pregnant, and maybe to McCarthy. Weird, I know. But that also, and I never mentioned in the last video, but some people state that that also proves that it wasn't Mary Kelly in the room because the corpse there was not pregnant, had never been pregnant. So they say it was a different body. Now, I don't subscribe to that as such because I've never found any concrete evidence to suggest that was the case, and I just don't quite buy it because Miller's Court was really small and McCarthy didn't have a wife, and I'm pretty sure she'd know if something was going on there. But that's also another theory that people had, is that perhaps McCarthy was letting Mary stay in the room for certain favours, wasn't totally concerned about the 6 weeks back rent because he was going to visit that room on occasion. And so he just wanted to make sure he sent Indian Harry off so he could get into the room and remove any evidence that maybe he had been there that evening. Because remember, Elizabeth Prater was hanging around outside Miller's Court the night of this incident, and she talks to John McCarthy, who came outside of his shop. And that was around 1:30 a.m. in the morning. So he was around in that morning. Interestingly, at the inquest, Elizabeth Prater says, I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't see anyone outside Miller's Court that morning. So she changed her story as well. Now, I don't buy that particular theory, but that little detail about McCarthy being around is of note. There is a third theory that Mary Kelly came up with a plan to back pay this 6 weeks of rent. And that would be letting other women use the room because then they could charge a premium for their services. They'd make a little bit more money, but Mary Kelly would get a cut of it and then pass that money on to McCarthy. And being the businessman that he was, that he liked that idea and so was going to allow Mary Kelly that breathing room basically to make this money back by that particular arrangement. And then again, Perhaps he wanted to make sure that there was no evidence of that going on before the police turned up. Now, there could be a very good reason that he didn't want the police to know about that particular activity. I just don't see that as the actual idea or theory. Now, I would suggest, and this is what I really think happened in this moment, and why the delay, and why McCarthy sent Harry off first. And it's not as sinister as we might think, but it does make a lot of sense. One, he would have identified that body no matter who it was. He would have said that is the woman who rented the room, regardless. Because someone in a very similar situation to him, who had a shop, had some buildings, lived nearby with his wife, had just gone to prison for allowing unfortunate to use her permanent rental for those activities. And the wife, because she knew about it, got a rather large fine, which would have been way more than that 6 weeks of rent. And no doubt McCarthy knew of this. And when it was highlighted that Mary perhaps was working as an unfortunate, he's like, well, I had no idea. Really? She was doing that in my rooms? Well, came as a bit of a shock to me. And yet we know he was outside of his shop at least once very early in the morning. No doubt he was doing that a bit, keeping an eye on the comings and goings and what was happening in his building. And he also had another unfortunate staying in Miller's Court who was also active in that industry. So it's highly unlikely that he did not know that that was going on in those rooms. But we can understand why he wanted plausible deniability. Because he's probably thinking, well, I could do 1 month in prison and my wife's going to have to stump up a certain amount of cash to pay the fine. That's way more than the 6 weeks of rent. So I'm hardly going to say, well, I don't know which woman it was, because many women were using that room. You'd just be saying, yep, no, it was the person who was renting the room. Don't want to know about it. But then why the delay in the time it took to find the body to get to the police station? Well, I think his question, asking, can I get another inspector, would suggest that perhaps he wasn't just selling candles at his shop. Now, Dorset Street had the reputation for being do anything Dorset Street. It didn't have the greatest reputations, and so no doubt if you were running a shop, it could be a very easy front for selling things of a bit of a contraband nature. And so now you know the police will be flooding into this area. You know the press will be flooding into this area. You know the public will be flooding into this area. You would need to make sure that nothing was going to be found that was going to draw that undue attention to yourself. So you're not going to just get Harry to stay back and guard the shop. You're going to tell him to get going, and then you'll probably run to your wife and say, can you just get rid of all this stuff that, make sure that this stuff's boxed up just in case they start going through the whole building. We don't need this to be found. I'm going to go catch up with Harry so that doesn't look weird, and we will take our time getting to that police station, and they possibly may have stopped and had a chat along the way. That is speculation, but it took them a long time to get there. But I am suggesting that it was to buy time to cover for whatever they were doing in that shop that perhaps they should not have been doing. But just to now back up the track and to further state why I believe it was not Mary Kelly in that room, because McCarthy, as I've stated, would not have wanted anyone to think someone else could have been in that room. But also, and this is, I think, interesting. I sort of feel that Indian Harry wasn't there to collect the rent. He was there to serve notice, to get her out of the room. Because no one states that was a regular occurrence of Indian Harry going to that door. Because if it was as suggested, he was doing that every day to get her money before she got out on the drink, then that would have been a known thing. But I'm suggesting that perhaps Mary Kelly knew this day of reckoning was coming. And she may have even set that day with John McCarthy saying, look, I'll have the money on November the 9th. And so then he sends Indian Harry to go collect, only to find what he found inside Miller's Court. But if you think even up to now this has been bizarre, you need to wait to see the next video. Because now the police, the press, and the public have all turned up. They don't get into that room for a while. And that story, and what was going on there, also just adds to all of the intrigue. But now I have to ask, what do you think? Do you think, again, I've gone way off the deep end with this? Can you find reasonable explanations as to why McCarthy and Harry's story changes and the time it took to get from each location? It's just all innocently explained and there's really nothing to see here. And maybe he did just have that candle shop. I sort of, as I've stated, believe the evidence points differently, but this is what the pub test is about. Let me know in your comments. Let's have that conversation. And look out for the next video, because the police, when they turn up, this gets really, really odd, because there was an event that happened on November the 8th and doesn't get known until after they enter that room. And it does have quite a significant bearing on the Jack the Ripper saga in general. So make sure, if you haven't done so, subscribe so you don't miss these videos coming out, because then the one after the next one will be discussing the possibility of who that person in Mary Kelly's room perhaps could have been. But also, as I stated at the start, thank you very much for watching and making the pub test what it is. It genuinely is appreciated. So like, subscribe, do all the usuals. I'm Owen, you've been watching the pub test, and we will see you on the next one.